Jake Wilson loved the quiet hours of the night. As the DJ for the late night shift at WNDR, a small independent radio station in the sleepy town of Ravenwood, he found solace in the solitude that came with his job. The town itself was nestled among thick forests, with mist often rolling in from the nearby lake, creating an eerie, almost mystical atmosphere. But Jake thrived in this environment, enjoying the peaceful isolation as he curated his eclectic mix of music for the night. The radio station was a small, cozy building on the outskirts of town. It had a rustic charm, with its old wooden floors that creaked underfoot and walls adorned with posters of classic rock bands. The control room was dimly lit, the soft glow of the equipment casting long shadows. Jake sat at the console, headphones on, eyes focused on the soundboard as he adjusted levels and prepared for his next set. He glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 1:30 a.m. The air outside was cool, and a light fog had begun to form, wrapping the town in a ghostly blanket. Jake's voice came through the speakers, smooth and calm. "Good evening, Ravenwood. This is Jake Wilson, and you're listening to WNDR, your home for the best late-night tunes. Let's take a journey through some of the greatest hits and hidden gems from around the world." He leaned back in his chair, enjoying the comforting hum of the equipment and the music playing softly in his headphones. The station was empty at this hour, save for him. The other DJs worked during the day, when the station was bustling with activity. But the night shift was different. It was just Jake and the music. Jake loved discovering new sounds and sharing them with his listeners. He had a reputation for playing rare and unique tracks, always looking for something that would surprise and delight his audience. His desk was cluttered with stacks of vinyl records, CDs, and tapes, each one a potential treasure. As the current song played, Jake sifted through a pile of records, searching for the next perfect track. His fingers brushed against a plain, unmarked record at the bottom of the stack. He pulled it out, frowning slightly. It was unusual for a record to have no label, no identifying marks at all. Curiosity piqued. Jake carefully placed the record on the turntable and lowered the needle. He adjusted his headphones, ready to preview the track before playing it on air. A slow, haunting melody began to fill his ears. The music was unlike anything he had ever heard, eerie, with an unsettling, almost hypnotic quality. Jake's brow furrowed. There was something strange about this record, something that sent a chill down his spine. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but the music seemed to seep into his very bones, leaving him feeling cold and uneasy. Shaking off the feeling, Jake decided to take a chance. He leaned into the microphone, his voice steady, but with a hint of excitement. "Folks, I've got something special for you tonight. A little mystery track that just might become your new favorite. Let's give it a listen." As the haunting melody began to play over the airwaves, Jake leaned back in his chair, unaware of the events he had just set in motion. The night was still, the town of Ravenwood wrapped in fog, as the mysterious music began to weave its sinister spell. Jake watched the needle glide over the grooves of the mysterious record, the haunting melody echoing through the quiet radio station. The music was captivating, yet deeply unsettling. It seemed to pulse with a life of its own, filling the room with an eerie presence. The phone on Jake's desk rang, jolting him from his trance. He picked it up, pressing the receiver to his ear. "WNDR, you're on the air," he said. A crackling voice came through, distorted and faint. "Jake, there's something wrong with my radio. It's making these weird noises. What did you just play?" Jake frowned, glancing at the record spinning on the turntable. "It's just a new track I found. Is anyone else experiencing this?" He hung up and switched to a line where multiple calls were coming in. One after another, listeners reported strange occurrences. Some heard static and whispers mingling with the music, while others felt an inexplicable chill or saw shadowy figures out of the corner of their eyes. Jake's curiosity was now tinged with unease. He decided to take the record off the air, but not before he listened more closely to it himself. He turned the volume down and listened intently, trying to decipher the layers of sound hidden within the music. There were faint voices, almost like whispers, intertwined with the melody. They seemed to be calling out, but Jake couldn't understand what they were saying. Another call came through. This time it was from an elderly woman who lived on the outskirts of town. Jake, "I've been listening to your show for years," she said, her voice trembling. "But tonight is different. I swear I heard my late husband's voice in that music. He was calling my name." Jake felt a shiver run down his spine. "Ma'am, are you sure? It could be a trick of the mind, the late hour playing tricks on you." "No, Jake," she insisted. "I know his voice. He was calling out to me. Please stop playing that record." Jake reassured her that he would, and after ending the call, he took the record off the turntable and placed it back in its sleeve. He stared at it for a moment, trying to make sense of what was happening. This wasn't just a strange song, there was something deeply wrong with it. Determined to find out more, Jake decided to investigate the record's origin. He flipped it over, looking for any markings, but it was completely blank. The plain brown packaging it came in offered no clues either. As the night went on, the calls from listeners continued. Some reported that their pets were acting strangely, barking or hissing at empty corners of their homes. Others spoke of sudden cold spots, even in rooms that were normally warm and cozy. The more Jake listened, the more he realized that this was no coincidence. The record was having a profound effect on those who heard it. Jake knew he had to get to the bottom of this. He contacted the station manager and explained the situation. They agreed to let Jake take a few days off to look into the matter, understanding the gravity of what was happening. The next morning, Jake set out to find anyone who could shed light on the mysterious record. He visited local music stores, hoping someone might recognize it, but no one had ever seen anything like it. He even reached out to a few collectors and experts, but they were just as baffled. As the days passed, Jake felt the weight of the mystery pressing down on him. The reports from listeners grew more disturbing, with some claiming to see ghostly apparitions and others experiencing vivid nightmares. The once peaceful town of Ravenwood was now gripped by a sense of fear and unease. One evening, Jake decided to visit an old record store on the outskirts of town, one that specialized in rare and obscure music. The owner, a reclusive man named Mr. Whittaker, was known for his extensive knowledge of music history. Jake hoped that if anyone could help him, it would be Mr. Whittaker. Entering the dimly lit store, Jake felt a strange sense of déjà vu. The air was thick with the scent of old vinyl and dust. Mr. Whittaker, an elderly man with a long white beard and piercing blue eyes, looked up from behind a counter. "Good evening," Jake said, approaching the counter. "I was wondering if you could help me with something." Mr. Whittaker nodded slowly. "What is it you're looking for?" Jake carefully pulled out the mysterious record and placed it on the counter. "Have you ever seen anything like this?" Mr. Whittaker's eyes widened as he examined the record. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice low and serious. "It arrived at the station a few nights ago. Ever since I played it on air, strange things have been happening. Listeners are reporting all sorts of bizarre occurrences." Mr. Whittaker nodded gravely. "I've heard of this record before. It's said to be cursed, carrying with it the remnants of a dark past. Those who listen to it are said to be haunted by the spirits trapped within." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What can I do to stop it? Mr. Whittaker looked Jake in the eye, his expression somber. "You must uncover the history of this record and find a way to put the spirits to rest. It won't be easy, but it's the only way to end the curse." With a sense of determination, Jake left the store, clutching the record tightly. He knew he had a long and difficult journey ahead, but he was resolved to uncover the truth and save his listeners from the terrifying curse he had unwittingly unleashed. Jake couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over him since his conversation with Mr. Whittaker. The notion of a cursed record seemed like something out of a horror movie, but the strange occurrences reported by his listeners were all too real. He had to get to the bottom of this, not just for his own peace of mind, but to protect the people of Ravenwood. That night, as he prepared for his next broadcast, Jake felt an unusual tension in the air. He decided to address the situation directly with his audience, hoping to gather more information about the strange events they were experiencing. "Good evening, Ravenwood," Jake began, his voice steady but serious. "This is Jake Wilson, and tonight I need your help. Many of you have called in with reports of strange occurrences after hearing a particular record I played a few nights ago. I want to get to the bottom of this, so please, if you've experienced anything unusual, call in and share your story." The phone lines lit up immediately, and Jake began taking calls one by one. The first caller was a young woman named Emily. "Jake, my dog hasn't stopped barking at the corner of my living room since that night. It's like he sees something that I can't." Next was an elderly man named Mr. Thompson. "I've lived in this town all my life, but I've never felt anything like this. I keep hearing whispers, even when I'm alone. It's like someone's trying to talk to me, but I can't understand them." Caller after caller shared their experiences: cold spots in their homes, flickering lights, and shadowy figures that seemed to vanish when looked at directly. Some even reported seeing ghostly apparitions of loved ones who had passed away. Jake listened intently, taking notes and trying to piece together the puzzle. Each story added a new layer to the mystery, and the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. He knew he had to find a way to stop whatever was happening before it got worse. As the night wore on, the reports grew more disturbing. A teenager named Alex called in, his voice shaking with fear. "Jake, I don't know what's happening, but I saw my reflection in the mirror, and it smiled back at me, even though I wasn't smiling. It's like there's something else inside me." Another call came from Sarah, a mother of 2 young children. "My kids have been waking up screaming every night since you played that record. They said they see a dark figure standing at the foot of their beds." The final call of the night was from a man named John. His voice was barely above a whisper, filled with a mix of fear and desperation. "Jake, you need to stop this. Whatever that record is, it's bringing something dark into our town. I saw my wife, who passed away last year. She told me to make it stop before it's too late." Jake felt the cold sweat break out on his forehead. The gravity of the situation was clear. This was no ordinary haunting. The record had unleashed something far more sinister, and it was up to him to stop it. After the broadcast, Jake sat alone in the dimly lit station, surrounded by the hum of the equipment. He stared at the unmarked record, feeling a mix of fear and determination. He couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread any longer. He needed to find out more about the curse and how to break it. The next morning, Jake decided to visit the local library, hoping to uncover any historical records or legends that might shed light on the mysterious record. He spent hours poring over old newspapers, town records, and folklore collections, looking for any mention of cursed music or haunted objects. Finally, he stumbled upon a series of articles from the early 1900s about a local musician named Victor Blackwood. Victor was known for his dark and haunting compositions, and rumors had circulated about his involvement in the occult. According to the articles, Victor had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and his final record was never found. Jake's heart raced as he read the accounts. Could this be the origin of the cursed record? The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but he needed more information. He decided to visit Victor Blackwood's old home, a dilapidated mansion on the outskirts of town that had long been abandoned. The townspeople avoided the place, believing it to be haunted by Victor's restless spirit. Jake hoped that by exploring the house, he might find clues to help him understand the curse and how to break it. As Jake approached the mansion, he felt a sense of foreboding. The air was thick with an unnatural chill, and the once grand structure now stood as a decaying relic of the past. Vines and moss covered the walls, and the windows were dark and empty. Jake pushed open the creaking front door and stepped inside. The interior was in ruins, with broken furniture and dust-covered surfaces. He carefully made his way through the house, searching for anything that might provide answers. In a small, dimly lit room at the back of the mansion, Jake found a collection of old sheet music and personal letters belonging to Victor Blackwood. Among the papers was a journal, its pages filled with Victor's thoughts and experiences. As Jake read through the journal, he discovered that Victor had become obsessed with the idea of capturing the essence of the afterlife in his music. He had conducted dark rituals, attempting to bind the spirits of the dead to his compositions. The final entry in the journal detailed Victor's last attempt, which resulted in his disappearance and the creation of the cursed record. Victor's notes contained a ritual to reverse the binding and release the trapped spirits. It required specific items and a location where the curse was strongest. Jake realized that the radio station where the record had been played would be the ideal place to perform the ritual. With renewed determination, Jake gathered the necessary items and prepared to confront the curse head-on. The night was dark and stormy as he returned to the station, the howling wind and driving rain adding to the sense of urgency. Jake set up the ritual in the control room, placing the items in a precise pattern and reciting the incantations from Victor's journal. As he began the ritual, the room grew colder and the air crackled with energy. Shadows seemed to move of their own accord and faint whispers filled the space. Despite his fear, Jake pressed on, repeating the incantations with increasing intensity. The room shook and the lights flickered wildly. Just as it seemed the darkness would overwhelm him, there was a blinding flash of light, and the whispers ceased. Jake collapsed to the floor, exhausted but relieved. The curse had been broken, and the spirits were finally at peace. The mysterious record lay shattered on the ground, its power destroyed. As the first light of dawn broke through the storm clouds, Jake knew that Ravenwood was safe once more. He had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but he also understood that the events of the past few days would leave a lasting mark on the town and on himself. Jake sat in his cluttered apartment, surrounded by notes and recordings from the past few nights. He had gathered everything he could find about Victor Blackwood and the Cursed Record. The information he had collected was both fascinating and terrifying, painting a picture of a man obsessed with the afterlife and the supernatural. Jake knew he needed to dig deeper. He had broken the initial curse, but the mystery surrounding the record and its origins still gnawed at him. He needed to understand the full extent of what Victor Blackwood had created and whether there were any lingering effects that could resurface. The next morning, Jake decided to visit Ravenwood's Historical Society. The society was housed in a small old building near the center of town, filled with dusty books, old photographs, and artifacts from Ravenwood's past. The curator, Mrs. Henderson, was a kindly woman in her 70s with a wealth of knowledge about the town's history. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson," Jake greeted her as he entered the building. "Good morning, Jake. What brings you here today?" She replied with a warm smile. "I'm researching Victor Blackwood and his music. I recently came across one of his records, and I've been experiencing some unusual events since then," Jake explained, choosing his words carefully. Mrs. Henderson's smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. "Victor Blackwood, you say? His name brings back dark memories. What exactly are you looking for?" "Anything you can tell me about his life, his music, and especially the circumstances around his disappearance," Jake said. Mrs. Henderson led Jake to a back room filled with old newspapers and records. Victor Blackwood was a talented musician, but he was also a troubled soul. He was fascinated by the occult and believed he could communicate with the dead through his music. Many people in town were wary of him, especially after a series of mysterious events and tragedies. She handed Jake a folder containing articles and documents about Victor. "These might help you understand more about him. Just be careful, Jake. Victor's story is not for the faint of heart." Jake thanked her and sat down at a nearby table to go through the folder. The articles painted a grim picture of Victor's life. He had been a brilliant composer, but his obsession with the supernatural had led him down a dark path. Several of his close associates and family members had died under mysterious circumstances, fueling rumors that his music was cursed. One article in particular caught Jake's attention. It was an interview with Victor's former housekeeper, who described strange rituals and eerie music that filled the Blackwood mansion. She spoke of a final, secret composition that Victor had been working on before his disappearance, a piece of music he believed would grant him eternal life. Jake's heart pounded as he read the account. This must be the origin of the Cursed Record. Victor had poured his darkest ambitions into that final composition, hoping to achieve immortality through his music. Instead, he had unleashed a malevolent force that continued to haunt those who encountered it. Determined to uncover more, Jake decided to visit the old mansion again, this time with a more thorough plan. He gathered his equipment, including a voice recorder, a flashlight, and Victor's journal, which he had borrowed from Mr. Whittaker. The journal contained detailed instructions for the rituals Victor had performed, as well as notes on the supernatural phenomena he had encountered. As Jake approached the mansion, he felt a familiar chill in the air. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the overgrown garden. He pushed open the creaking front door and stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under his weight. Using the flashlight, Jake navigated through the darkened rooms, heading straight for the small room at the back of the house where he had found Victor's papers. He set up his recorder and began to explore, looking for any additional clues that might shed light on Victor's final composition. As he sifted through the dusty sheets of music and old letters, Jake noticed a small, hidden compartment in the wall. He pried it open and found a stack of parchment tied with a black ribbon. The parchment contained a series of symbols and diagrams, along with more detailed instructions for a ritual to summon spirits. Jake's pulse quickened as he realized he had found something significant. These documents seemed to be the missing pieces of Victor's final work, the elements that completed the curse. He carefully placed the parchment in his bag and continued his search. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped sharply, and Jake felt an icy breath on the back of his neck. He turned quickly, but there was nothing there. The air was thick with an oppressive presence, and Jake knew he was not alone. He heard a faint whisper, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. "Help us! Free us!" Jake's heart raced as he tried to make sense of the voice. It seemed to be coming from the very walls of the mansion, echoing through the halls. He followed the sound, his flashlight casting eerie shadows on the peeling wallpaper. The whispers grew louder as he approached the basement door. Jake hesitated, feeling a wave of dread wash over him. He had never ventured into the basement before, but he knew he had to find the source of the haunting. Taking a deep breath, Jake descended the narrow, creaking stairs into the basement. The air was damp and cold, filled with the scent of mildew and decay. His flashlight beam revealed old furniture, broken crates, and a dusty piano against the far wall. As he moved closer to the piano, the whispers intensified. Jake could now make out individual voices, each pleading for help. He placed his hand on the piano, feeling the chill of the keys beneath his fingers. The instrument seemed to pulse with a dark energy, as if it were alive. Jake realized that the piano was the centerpiece of Victor's final ritual. It was here that Victor had performed his darkest compositions, attempting to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Jake knew he had to complete the ritual to release the trapped spirits and end the curse once and for all. Following the instructions in Victor's journal, Jake arranged the items he had brought with him around the piano. He lit a series of candles, their flickering flames casting long shadows on the basement walls. He began to recite the incantations, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his insides. As Jake spoke the final words of the ritual, the air in the basement grew still. The oppressive presence seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of calm. The whispers faded, and the temperature gradually returned to normal. Jake felt the sense of relief wash over him. He had done it. The spirits were free, and the curse was broken. He gathered his equipment and made his way back up the stairs, feeling lighter with each step. Back at the radio station, Jake carefully stored the documents and Victor's journal in a secure place. He knew he had to keep them safe, just in case the curse ever threatened to return. He also decided to share his experiences with the town, hoping that by shedding light on the dark history of Victor Blackwood, he could help prevent future incidents. That night, Jake went on air with a special broadcast. He recounted the story of Victor Blackwood, the cursed record, and the haunting that had plagued Ravenwood. He spoke of the power of music and the importance of respecting the unknown. As Jake signed off, he felt a sense of closure. He had faced the darkness and emerged stronger for it. The town of Ravenwood could finally rest easy, knowing that the curse had been laid to rest. But as Jake left the station and walked into the cool night air, he couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't quite over. There was a lingering sense of unease, a feeling that something still lurked in the shadows. He knew he would have to remain vigilant, ready to face whatever darkness might arise in the future. Despite Jake's efforts to break the curse, the town of Ravenwood remained uneasy. The reports of strange occurrences continued, though less frequent and severe. It seemed that while the spirits were at rest, the dark energy of Victor Blackwood's final composition still lingered, like a shadow that refused to dissipate. Jake was determined to ensure the safety of his listeners and the town. He began to research more deeply into the origins of the dark energy that Victor had tapped into. He reached out to experts in the paranormal and occult, hoping to find a way to cleanse the lingering darkness completely. One evening, Jake received a call from Dr. Eliza Montgomery, a renowned paranormal investigator. She had heard about the events in Ravenwood and was intrigued by the case. "Jake, I believe I can help you," she said over the phone, "but it won't be easy. The energy you're dealing with is ancient and powerful. We need to gather more information and perform a more thorough cleansing ritual." Jake agreed to meet Dr. Montgomery at the radio station the following night. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the town, Jake prepared for her arrival. He felt a sense of hope, believing that with her expertise, they could finally rid Ravenwood of the lingering darkness. Dr. Montgomery arrived with a team of assistants and an array of equipment. She was a tall, imposing woman with sharp features and piercing green eyes. Her presence commanded attention, and Jake felt reassured by her confidence. "Let's get to work," she said, wasting no time. She instructed her team to set up various sensors and recording devices around the station, hoping to capture any residual energy. She also brought several ancient texts and artifacts, tools for the ritual they would perform later. As they began their investigation, the temperature in the station dropped noticeably. The lights flickered, and an eerie silence filled the air. Jake felt a familiar chill run down his spine, the same sensation he had felt when he first played the Cursed Record. Dr. Montgomery examined the readings from her equipment, her brow furrowed in concentration. "There's definitely something here," she said. "The energy is fluctuating wildly. We need to proceed with caution." Jake led the team to the control room where the haunting had been most intense. Dr. Montgomery placed a series of candles in a circle and began to recite an incantation in a language Jake didn't recognize. The air seemed to vibrate with her words, and a low hum filled the room. Suddenly, one of the assistants cried out in pain. Jake turned to see him clutching his arm, where a deep scratch had appeared, as if inflicted by an invisible force. Dr. Montgomery continued her incantation, her voice growing louder and more insistent. The room grew colder, and the hum intensified, becoming a deafening roar. The candles flickered wildly, their flames bending and twisting as if caught in a violent wind. Jake felt a surge of fear, but he forced himself to stay focused. As Dr. Montgomery reached the climax of her incantation, a blinding flash of light filled the room. The roar ceased abruptly, and the air grew still. The temperature began to rise, and the oppressive presence lifted. Dr. Montgomery sighed in relief. "It's done. The cleansing ritual should have removed the lingering dark energy, but we'll need to monitor the situation closely for the next few days." Jake thanked Dr. Montgomery and her team, feeling a renewed sense of hope. He knew the battle wasn't over, but they had taken a significant step toward restoring peace to Ravenwood. Over the next few days, Jake remained vigilant, monitoring the station and keeping in touch with his listeners. The reports of strange occurrences dwindled, and the town began to return to normal. Jake felt a sense of accomplishment, believing that they had finally put an end to the nightmare. However, just as he was beginning to relax, Jake received a call from Sarah, the mother who had reported her children's nightmares. Her voice was filled with panic. "Jake, it's happening again. My children are waking up screaming every night. They're seeing that dark figure again. You need to do something." Jake's heart sank. He knew that despite their efforts, the dark energy had not been completely eradicated. Determined to find a permanent solution, he decided to delve deeper into Victor Blackwood's life and the origins of his final composition. Jake spent hours in the library, poring over ancient texts and historical records. He discovered that Victor had not acted alone in his quest for immortality. He had been part of a secret society dedicated to the dark arts, and his final composition was the culmination of their collective efforts. The society, known as the Order of the Eternal Echo, had performed numerous rituals to harness supernatural power. Victor's composition was their most ambitious project, designed to bind the spirits of the dead to the music and achieve eternal life. However, the ritual had gone horribly wrong, trapping the spirits in the record and cursing anyone who listened to it. Jake realized that to break the curse completely, he needed to find the remaining members of the Order and perform a final, decisive ritual to release the spirits and cleanse the dark energy. He reached out to Dr. Montgomery, explaining his findings. "We need to find the surviving members of the Order," Jake said. "They're the key to ending this once and for all." Dr. Montgomery agreed to help, and together they began to track down the descendants of the Order. It was a daunting task, as many records had been lost or destroyed over the years. However, They managed to locate a few individuals who were willing to assist. One of them was Professor Albert Hargrove, a historian with a deep knowledge of the occult. He had inherited his ancestors' research and was intrigued by the opportunity to put an end to the Order's dark legacy. He provided Jake and Dr. Montgomery with crucial information about the final ritual. The ritual required a specific alignment of celestial bodies, which would occur in just a few days. They needed to gather certain rare ingredients and perform the ritual at the site where Victor had conducted his original composition, the old mansion on the outskirts of town. As the day of the ritual approached, Jake, Dr. Montgomery, and Professor Hargrove prepared meticulously. They gathered the ingredients, studied the incantations, and coordinated with the descendants of the Order to ensure everything was in place. The night of the ritual was clear and cold, the stars shining brightly overhead. Jake and the others arrived at the mansion, feeling a sense of foreboding. They set up their equipment and began the ritual, each step precise and deliberate. As they chanted the incantations, the air grew thick with tension. Shadows seemed to dance on the walls, and the temperature dropped sharply. Jake felt a familiar chill, but he pushed through, focusing on the words of the ritual. The final incantation required each member of the group to recite a specific phrase, binding their collective energy to the ritual. As they spoke the words, a blinding light filled the room, and a powerful force seemed to lift the oppressive presence. The mansion shook, and the sound of ghostly wails filled the air. The spirits trapped by Victor's composition were finally being released. Jake and the others continued the ritual, their voices strong and unwavering. After what felt like an eternity, the light began to fade, and the wails subsided. The air grew still, and the temperature began to rise. Jake felt a sense of profound relief. The ritual had worked. They had done it. The curse was broken, and the spirits were finally at peace. Jake thanked Dr. Montgomery, Professor Hargrove, and the others for their help. They had faced the darkness together and emerged victorious. As Jake walked away from the mansion, he felt a sense of closure. The nightmare was over, and Ravenwood could finally rest easy. But he also knew that the experience had changed him. He had faced his fears and discovered a strength he never knew he had. Back at the radio station, Jake went on air to share the story with his listeners. He spoke of the courage and determination it had taken to break the curse, and the importance of facing the unknown with an open mind and a brave heart. The town of Ravenwood slowly returned to normal, but the memory of the haunting remained. Jake continued his broadcasts, always mindful of the lessons he had learned. The darkness had been vanquished, but the experience had left an indelible mark on his soul. And though the shadows had retreated, Jake knew that he would always be vigilant, ready to face whatever darkness might arise in the future. For in the quiet hours of the night, when the world was still and the air was thick with silence, he would remember the last broadcast and the courage it had taken to bring light to the darkness. The victory over the lingering darkness brought a temporary sense of relief to Ravenwood, but Jake remained uneasy. Despite the apparent success of the ritual, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still amiss. He had spent countless nights ensuring the safety of his listeners, yet the shadows seemed to whisper that their ordeal was far from over. One evening, as Jake was preparing for his broadcast, a familiar chill swept through the radio station. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, and the lights flickered ominously. Jake's instincts screamed that the dark energy was returning. He had to act quickly to prevent a resurgence of the curse. Jake decided to reach out to Professor Hargrove and Dr. Montgomery immediately. He explained the situation, and they agreed to meet at the station that night. As the clock ticked towards midnight, the trio gathered in the control room, the weight of the impending threat pressing down on them. "Jake, we need to trace the source of this resurgence," Dr. Montgomery said, her voice filled with urgency. "The final ritual may have been incomplete or disrupted. We need to perform a thorough investigation to find out what went wrong." Professor Hargrove nodded in agreement. "We should start by examining the site of the original ritual once more. There might be clues we missed." The three of them hurried back to the old mansion, their minds racing against time. The night was eerily silent, the only sound being the crunch of leaves underfoot as they approached the decaying structure. Inside, the mansion felt even colder and more oppressive than before. Jake led them to the basement. where they had performed the ritual. The air was thick with a palpable sense of dread. As they examined the room, Professor Hargrove noticed something unusual, a faint glowing symbol etched into the wall, previously hidden under layers of grime. This symbol wasn't here before, Hargrove said, his voice filled with awe and concern. It appears to be a ward of containment, likely drawn by Victor himself to harness the dark energy. Dr. Montgomery examined the symbol closely. This must be the key. The ritual's power is still bound to this place. We need to break this containment to release the remaining energy. With renewed determination, they prepared to perform another ritual, this time focused on breaking the containment ward. They gathered their supplies and set up a circle of protection around the symbol. Jake felt a mixture of fear and resolve. They were about to confront the very heart of the curse. As Dr. Montgomery began the incantations, the room grew colder and shadows seemed to gather around them. The symbol on the wall pulsed with a dark, malevolent energy. Professor Hargrove joined in, his voice steady despite the tension. Jake could feel the energy building, a powerful force swirling around them. He took a deep breath and added his voice to the incantation, the words resonating through the room. The symbol on the wall began to glow brighter, the light almost blinding. Suddenly, the ground shook, and a deafening roar filled the air. The symbol shattered, releasing a wave of dark energy that surged through the room. Jake, Dr. Montgomery, and Professor Hargrove held their ground, their combined efforts pushing back against the force. As the energy dissipated, the room fell silent. The oppressive presence lifted, and the temperature began to rise. The symbol was gone, leaving only a faint scorch mark on the wall. Jake felt a sense of triumph. They had done it. The final remnants of Victor Blackwood's curse had been vanquished. However, their victory was short-lived. Jake's phone buzzed with an urgent message from Sarah. "Jake, please help. The dark figure is back, and my children are in danger." Jake's heart sank. Despite their efforts, the darkness had found a way to persist. He knew he had to act quickly. He, Dr. Montgomery, and Professor Hargrove rushed to Sarah's house, determined to save her children and end the curse once and for all. As they arrived, the house was engulfed in a suffocating darkness. The air was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the faint cries of Sarah's children. Jake led the way, flashlight in hand, as they navigated through the house. They found Sarah and her children huddled in the living room, terror etched on their faces. A dark figure loomed in the corner, its form shifting and malevolent. Jake felt a surge of anger and determination. He wouldn't let this darkness harm anyone else. Dr. Montgomery and Professor Hargrove began to chant the final incantation, their voices rising in unison. Jake joined them, his voice filled with resolve. The dark figure shrieked, its form contorting as the energy of the incantation enveloped it. The air crackled with power as the dark figure struggled against the incantation. Jake focused all his energy on the chant, willing the darkness to dissipate. Slowly, the figure began to fade, its form dissolving into nothingness. With a final, echoing scream, the dark figure vanished. The air grew still, and the oppressive presence lifted. Sarah's children clung to her, tears streaming down their faces. Jake felt a wave of relief. They had succeeded. As the first light of dawn broke through the windows, Jake knew that the battle was finally over. The curse had been broken, and the lingering darkness had been banished. Ravenwood was safe at last. Back at the radio station, Jake went on air with a special broadcast. He recounted the final battle against the darkness, the courage it took to face the unknown, and the power of unity in overcoming fear. He thanked his listeners for their support and resilience, reminding them that even in the darkest times, hope and courage could prevail. As Jake signed off, he felt a sense of peace. The nightmare was over, and the town of Ravenwood could finally rest easy. But he also knew that the experience had changed him. He had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. For now, he would enjoy the quiet hours of the night, knowing that he had brought light to the shadows. The air was crisp and clear as Jake walked through the quiet streets of Ravenwood. The sun had just set, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and dance in the fading light. Despite the recent turmoil, the town was finally beginning to feel normal again. The oppressive presence that had once gripped Ravenwood was gone, and a sense of peace had returned. Jake headed to the radio station for his evening broadcast. He was determined to continue providing solace and connection to his listeners, especially after everything they had been through together. The station, once a battleground for dark forces, now felt like a sanctuary of light and hope. As he settled into the control room, Jake felt a sense of accomplishment. They had faced an unimaginable threat and emerged victorious. However, a part of him remained vigilant, ever watchful for signs of lingering darkness. The phone rang just as Jake was about to go on air. It was Dr. Montgomery. "Jake, I wanted to check in and see how you're doing. The town seems much calmer now." "Thanks, Dr. Montgomery. Things are finally looking up," Jake replied. "I can't thank you enough for your help." "It was a team effort," she said. "And remember, if you ever need anything, we're here for you." Jake thanked her and ended the call. He took a deep breath and leaned into the microphone. "Good evening, Ravenwood. This is Jake Wilson, and you're listening to WNDR. Tonight, we're celebrating the resilience and strength of our community. We faced darkness together and come out stronger. Let's enjoy some music and remember that no matter what, we're never alone." The familiar sound of music filled the airwaves, comforting and uplifting. Jake felt a sense of fulfillment as he connected with his listeners, sharing stories and songs that brought joy and hope. As the night wore on, Jake reflected on the journey they had been through. He had faced his deepest fears and discovered a strength he never knew he had. The town of Ravenwood had stood together, united against a common threat, and had come out stronger for it. Just as Jake was about to close his broadcast, the phone rang again. This time it was Sarah. "Jake, I just wanted to thank you for everything. My kids are sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. We couldn't have done it without you." Jake smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "I'm just glad we could help, Sarah. Take care, and remember, we're always here if you need us." As the final song of the night played, Jake felt a sense of closure. The darkness had been vanquished, and the town was safe. But more importantly, he had learned the power of community and the strength that came from standing together. He signed off with a heartfelt message. "Thank you, Ravenwood, for your strength and support. Together, we faced the darkness and found the light. Stay safe and keep believing in the power of unity." The control room fell silent as the broadcast ended. Jake leaned back in his chair, feeling a sense of peace and accomplishment. The nightmare was over, and Ravenwood was at peace. As Jake left the station and walked into the cool night air, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The experience had changed him, making him more resilient and determined to protect his community. He knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would face them with courage and hope. The town of Ravenwood slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the memory of the haunting lingered. People shared stories of their experiences, finding comfort in knowing they were not alone. Jake continued his broadcasts, always mindful of the lessons he had learned. And though the shadows had retreated, Jake remained vigilant, ready to face whatever darkness might arise in the future. For in the quiet hours of the night, when the world was still and the air was thick with silence, he remembered the last broadcast and the courage it had taken to bring light to the darkness. The story of the Cursed Record and the battle against the dark forces became a part of Ravenwood's history, a reminder of the power of unity and resilience. And as the town moved forward, Jake knew that they were stronger together, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. As he walked home, the stars shining brightly overhead, Jake felt a deep sense of peace. The nightmare was over, and the town of Ravenwood could finally rest easy. But he also knew that he would always be vigilant, ready to protect his community and face whatever darkness might arise. For now, he would enjoy the quiet moments, cherishing the light that had emerged from the shadows. And as he looked out at the night sky, he knew that the future was bright, filled with hope and the promise of a new day. The sun rose over Ravenwood, casting a warm golden glow across the town. The events of the past few weeks had left their mark on everyone, but the residents were beginning to heal. The fear and uncertainty had given way to a renewed sense of community and strength. Jake sat at his favorite coffee shop, sipping his morning coffee and watching the town come to life. The familiar sights and sounds brought him comfort, a reminder that life goes on, even after the darkest of times. He reflected on the journey he had been through, the fear, the determination, and ultimately, the victory over the darkness that had threatened their town. The radio station had become a symbol of resilience for Ravenwood. People often stopped by to thank Jake for his efforts, sharing their own stories of courage and hope. The station's broadcasts now included not just music, but also messages of unity and support, helping to strengthen the bonds within the community. Jake had grown closer to Dr. Montgomery and Professor Hargrove, forming a bond forged in the crucible of their shared struggle. They often met to discuss their experiences and plan for any future challenges. The sense of camaraderie and mutual respect was a source of great comfort to Jake. One evening, as Jake prepared for his nightly broadcast, he found a letter on his desk. It was from Sarah, the mother whose children had been plagued by nightmares. She thanked him once again for his bravery and included a drawing from her kids depicting a hero standing against a dark figure with the words, "Thank you, Jake," scrawled at the bottom. Jake felt a lump in his throat as he looked at the drawing. It was a reminder of why he had fought so hard, to protect the people he cared about and to bring light into the darkness. He pinned the drawing on the wall beside his desk, a symbol of the hope and resilience that defined Ravenwood. As he leaned into the microphone that night, Jake spoke from the heart. "Good evening, Ravenwood. Tonight, I want to remind you all of the strength and courage we have found together. We faced the darkness and emerged stronger. Let's continue to support each other and remember that, no matter what, we are never alone."